What would you do if your entire life blew apart in the middle of a Sunday service? I'm sitting in the fifth row on the right next to the woman I once believed I'd grow old with. And up on the stage, the man who's been sleeping with her is preaching a sermon called The Faithful Marriage. 200 people bow their heads, eyes shut, whispering, Amen. And in that exact moment, his wife, Hannah Crane, quietly stands up. In my hand is a cheap little USB drive that's about to burn his entire fake polished image to the ground. The screens are ready. The evidence is loaded. After this moment, there's no turning back for any of them. And if you're a man who's ever thought, that could never happen to me, don't look away, hit subscribe, stick with me, because this might be the story you didn't know you needed. Before that Sunday, my life looked solid. Not exciting, not special, just solid in the way a lot of men my age quietly hope for. I'm a construction project manager here in Maple Ridge, Ohio. Nothing glamorous. I wear steel-toed boots more than dress shoes. But the bills were paid, the mortgage was current, and there was gas in the truck. I was the guy people called when something needed fixing. I liked that. I took pride in being dependable. Becca taught second grade at Maple Ridge Elementary. Kids adored her. Parents brought her coffee at conferences and called her an angel. In town, if you said Becca Coalfield, people smiled before they even answered. Lakeside Fellowship wasn't just a church to us. It was our circle, our calendar, our support system. Potlucks, baby showers, prayer chains. That place was the glue of our little world. Inside that world, I saw myself as the rock of our home, the steady husband, the quiet provider, the man who kept his word even when no one was watching. If you'd met me then, you'd have seen a simple thing, a man whose name still meant something. My word used to mean everything. And in our world, no one's word seemed stronger than Pastor Mitchell Crane's. If you grew up around small-town churches, you know the type. Firm handshake, warm smile, remembers your kids' names, makes you feel like God might actually still be paying attention. That was Pastor Mitchell Crane. His sermons weren't fancy, but they landed. When he talked about marriage, about loving your wife like Christ loves the church, every man in those pews nodded along. We'd look over at our wives, squeeze a hand, feel a little taller walking out to the parking lot. He had a way of turning basic truth into something that hit you right in the chest. His wife, Hannah, was the quiet backbone of everything. She ran events, organized meals, checked on sick people, made sure the coffee never ran out. She wasn't loud, but when she said she was praying for you, you believed her. Becca and I ended up in their orbit pretty quick. Couples nights, small groups, leadership meetings. We were on the volunteer lists, in the pictures, around the table. People would point to us and say, "That's a solid couple right there." At church, we wore that like a badge. Looking back, that was the hook. Because in a town like Maple Ridge, when a man stands behind a pulpit, holds a Bible, and looks you straight in the eye, you don't just trust his advice. I trusted him with my soul. The first crack didn't look like much. It showed up on a random Tuesday afternoon. I got off a job site early. Rain had shut everything down, so I headed home, thinking I'd surprise Becca, maybe grab an early dinner together. I walked in quiet, boots off at the door, and heard her upstairs in our bedroom. At first I thought she was watching something on her phone, because the voice I heard didn't sound like hers. It was soft, almost girlish, this higher, breathy tone I'd never heard come out of my wife. Then I realized she was talking like that. I caught, "I miss you too," in that voice. My stomach dropped. I stepped into the doorway, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. Phone clutched to her chest, cheeks red. "It's my mom," she blurted. Her mom's been dead for years. There was this half second where our eyes locked, and we both knew that excuse didn't land. Then she laughed it off, forced and nervous. "I mean my sister. I just hit the wrong word." I stood there, every alarm in my head going off, and still told myself, don't be paranoid, don't be that guy. But as I walked away, I saw her phone on the nightstand, face down, and felt my heart drop clean through the floor. You'd think if someone is going to blow your life up, there'd be this one big moment. Most of the time, it's little things that stack up. A week or so after that phone call, my truck was in the shop, so I took Becca's car to work. Nothing unusual. Same air freshener, same tote bag in the back, same half-empty coffee cup rolling around in the console. But when I slid the seat back, I saw it. A braided, fast-charging cable tucked down by the rail. Nice one. Expensive. Not ours. We're the kind of people who use whatever came with the phone until it frays. That cable didn't belong. That night, I asked about it as casually as I could. "Hey, whose charger is that in your car?" She barely blinked. "Oh, someone from church must have left it. Probably Emily from worship team. She was riding with me last week." Sunday, I caught Emily in the hallway. "Hey, you leave a charger in Becca's car?" She frowned. "No, I don't even have that kind." Driving home, that answer just sat in my gut like a rock. All at once it hit me. If I kept swallowing this, I wasn't being trusting. I was being played. I wrapped my hands around the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, staring at the road, and the only thing in my head was a cold, ugly question. Am I the idiot here? After the charger thing, I started noticing other changes. Small, stupid things, until they didn't feel stupid anymore. Becca's phone used to live on the counter, screen up, buzzing with texts from parents and other teachers. Now it was always face down, always within reach, always locking a little too fast. One night we were watching TV, and her phone lit up. I couldn't see who it was, just the glow under her hand as she flipped it over. I joked, "New passcode or something?" trying to keep it light. "Yeah," she said, eyes on the screen. "I changed it and, honestly, I kind of forgot the new one." That landed wrong. You don't kind of forget the code to the device you're glued to all day. I said, "You can just reset it if it's a problem." She stiffened like I'd slapped her. "Don't you trust me, Nathan?" That word hit like a punch. Trust. As a man, you build your whole life on that one thing. Your word, your loyalty, your ability to protect what's yours. You don't plan for the day your gut screams that you're being lied to by the person who sleeps next to you. I sat there, staring at the black TV screen after she went to bed, and something in me finally shifted. I didn't know what the truth was yet, but I knew I needed it. The next step felt dirty, even though I paid the bill. We're on a family plan, same carrier, same account. I'd logged in 100 times before just to check data usage, see when a payment was due. This time my hands shook when I typed my password. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I'd prove myself wrong and feel stupid and then learn to relax. That was the hope. I opened the call and text history for her number, and the screen filled with one line, over and over. Same phone number, hundreds of texts, calls that ran 40, 50, 60 minutes at a time. Early mornings, late nights, right when she was grading papers or running to the store. I copy-pasted the number into a reverse lookup. Heart pounding, window spinning, dumb little loading wheel taking forever. And then the name popped up. Mitchell Crane, the man preaching about faithfulness, the man I prayed with, the man I told private things I'd never said out loud to anyone else. My vision tunneled. I could hear my own breathing like it was coming from down a hallway. This wasn't a vague fear anymore. It wasn't a funny feeling or a maybe. Their connection was right there in black and white. My wife, my pastor, my phone bill. I just sat there in my truck, in my own driveway, staring at that name on the screen, feeling like the ground under my life had finally given way. You'd think that's the moment I confronted her. It wasn't. When I finally walked into the house that night, Becca was at the stove, stirring a pot of spaghetti like any other Tuesday. She smiled over her shoulder. "Hey, you're home early. How was your day?" I kissed her on the cheek. My lips touched her skin. My chest felt like shattered glass. On the outside, I played my part. Long day. Concrete got delayed. Same small talk, same routine. She launched into stories about her students, a kid who finally nailed his spelling test, a funny thing that happened at recess. I nodded at the right moments, said wow and "that's wild" on cue. But it all sounded far away, like I was listening from outside my own life. Inside, something had gone completely silent. No yelling, no tears, just this heavy, stunned quiet. When dishes were done and she went to bed, I told her I'd be in soon. Instead, I walked back out to my truck, sat in the dark driveway, and just stayed there. No music, no phone, just me. That name on the bill burned into my brain, and a simple, brutal fact. It had knocked the wind out of me. I sat there for hours. The next day, my shock started to harden into something else. Resolve. I knew phone records could still be twisted. Church business. Counseling. You're reading into it. I could already hear the excuses he'd make, the spiritual language he'd hide behind. If I was going to blow my life up, I needed more than a hunch and a call log. On my lunch break, I drove to the carrier store instead of eating, sat across from some kid in a polo who had no idea my marriage was bleeding out while he clicked around his screen. I want to upgrade the plan, I told him. Add full cloud backup on this line. I gave Becca's number. He smiled like he was helping me set up something convenient, something loving. It'll take about 48 hours for everything to sync, he said. Messages, photos, the whole thing. 48 hours. 2 days of pretending nothing was wrong. 2 days of acting like my home wasn't sitting on top of a landmine I'd just armed myself. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. I prayed a short, pitiful prayer. God, if I'm wrong, let me be wrong. Please. Then, alone in my home office, I opened the browser, logged into the account, and clicked the last button that turned on automatic backup. Confirm. The ticking clock started the second I hit it. A few days after I flipped that backup on, the church had its annual leadership retreat. Of course Becca was going. Of course Mitchell was leading it. I watched her pack in our bedroom, worn leather Bible, a spiral notebook she used as a prayer journal, a couple of sweatshirts, plain flannel pajamas. On the surface, it all looked so wholesome, like a promo picture for Christian marriage. She was chattering about breakout sessions and quiet time by the lake, asking if I thought the weather would hold. I nodded in the right places, but inside it felt like I was watching a movie of my own life, one I suddenly didn't believe. Friday morning, I carried her bag to the door. She kissed me quick, said, "Pray for us this weekend, okay?" The words tasted wrong. When the door shut behind her, the house swallowed the sound. That night, I microwaved leftovers and couldn't taste a single bite. No TV, no music. Just the refrigerator humming in a too-quiet kitchen and my eyes drifting back to the blank laptop screen on the table. Somewhere out there, their weekend was beginning. Mine was just an empty chair. I sat down and let the silence hit me like a wave. Sunday afternoon, I heard her car in the driveway before I saw her. Becca walked in smelling like pine trees and cheap lodge soap, hair pulled back, cheeks flushed from the cold. She dropped her bag, wrapped her arms around me, and held on longer than usual. "That retreat was exactly what I needed," she said into my chest. "I feel spiritually renewed." I stood there, arms half raised, my body stiff. To her, this was a hug. To me, it felt like being wrapped in someone else's story. Her smile was bright, open, the kind that used to make my whole day better. Now it just made the room feel darker. She talked about worship by the lake, late-night prayer circles, how God really showed up. I heard the words, but all I could think was, "He showed up for who?" I lied 3 times in 5 minutes. "Yeah? That's great. I'm happy for you." That night she fell asleep fast, breathing slow, one hand relaxed across my side of the bed like nothing in our world had shifted an inch. I waited until her breathing settled into that deep, steady rhythm I knew by heart. Then I slipped out of bed, walked down the hall to my office, opened the laptop, and signed into the cloud. The sync bar crawled across the screen like it was dragging my stomach with it. First it was just folders, dates, file counts, normal stuff. Then the thumbnails started to appear, little squares filling up the screen one by one. I clicked the most recent batch. Hotel wallpaper, the kind of generic beige pattern you only see in places you rent by the night. Another photo, a bedside lamp I didn't recognize. A Bible tossed on the nightstand next to 2 styrofoam cups with coffee sleeves from a town I knew they'd gone to counsel someone in. Then the texts, row after row. "Can't wait to hold you again. Wish I could fall asleep next to you every night. I hate leaving your side." Timestamps lined up perfectly with planning meetings and late-night prayer sessions at church. Times she told me she was at school, staying late with parents. Just one more conference. One message stopped me cold. "What we have is blessed, Becca. God wouldn't make it feel this right if it was wrong." Blessed. That word burned. I clicked another image and there it was, a blurry selfie off a hotel mirror. His face half in frame, her face tucked into his neck. Too close, too familiar, too intimate to explain away. Whatever hope I had left died right there. It didn't just hurt, it burned me to the ground. I wish I could say I closed the laptop after that. I didn't. I kept scrolling, like pressing on a bruise just to see how bad it really was. The part that got me the most wasn't the cheap romance lines. It was the way they talked about God. God just wants us happy. I feel more alive with you than I ever have. This has to be from Him. What we have is real love. Our marriages are dead. God understands. They took every verse Mitchell ever preached about grace, about freedom, about God looking at the heart, and bent it just enough to fit their secret. He knew the language. He knew how to make it sound holy while he was destroying two homes from the inside. That's what lit me up. Not just the betrayal as a husband, the betrayal as a man who built his life on that book he waved around every Sunday. Lakeside wasn't just a building to me, it was where I learned how to be a better husband, a better father someday, a better man. And he had been using that same platform as cover. There's a name for that. Spiritual abuse. I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was a man standing in public, speaking in God's name, while sneaking around in private with my wife in hotel rooms. In that chair, sometime around 2 a.m, a cold, clear line formed in my chest. If you sin in public and hide behind God to do it, then your accountability needs to be just as public. For a while I sat there playing out conversations in my head. I imagined dragging Becca into the kitchen, putting the printed screenshots on the table, asking, "What is this?" I imagined calling Mitchell, telling him to meet me somewhere off church property, and seeing if he'd even have the guts to look me in the eye. But every version of that ended the same way, them talking circles around me, him slipping into preacher mode, soft voice, Bible verses, "You're hurting, brother, the enemy is attacking your mind." Her crying, saying it was emotional, not physical, that I'd pushed her away, that I was overreacting. They were both good with words, and I was already the one who looked crazy in my own head. I realized something then. A private confrontation would give them home field advantage. It would give them time to rewrite the story, clean it up, spin it for the church, maybe even paint me as bitter, unstable, unforgiving. If they'd built this thing in the dark, I needed light. If they'd lied as a team, I needed one of my own. I scrolled back through the messages until I saw her name, over and over, Hannah Crane. My thumb hovered over her contact for a long second. Then I hit call. It rang longer than felt normal, long enough for me to almost hang up and pretend I'd misdialed. Then a soft voice. "Hello? This is Hannah?" For a beat, I couldn't speak. All the words I'd rehearsed vanished. I finally managed. "Hannah, it's Nathan. Nathan Colefield." Silence. Not the confused kind, the heavy kind. You could feel the weight through the line. She let out a breath I didn't know she'd been holding and said very quietly, "I've been waiting for this call." Those 5 words went straight through me. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't confused. She was ready. I cleared my throat. "I found some things about Mitchell and Becca." My voice cracked on my wife's name. "I don't want to assume, but I think you already know what I'm talking about." Another pause. Then, "I do." She sounded tired in a way you don't fix with sleep. We both stumbled around details for a minute, half starting sentences, stopping ourselves. Finally, I said, "I have proof. Messages, photos. I don't want to text any of it. Can we meet somewhere? Not in Maple Ridge?" "Yeah," she said. "There's a coffee shop off the highway in Brookfield. Tomorrow? 2 o'clock?" When we hung up, my hand was still shaking, but for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. Brookfield is just far enough from Maple Ridge that you don't run into anyone from church by accident. That's why we picked it. I got there early and sat where I could see the door. When Hannah walked in, she looked smaller than I remembered, like someone had let the air out of her, but her back was straight and her chin was up. No makeup, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She ordered black coffee and wrapped both hands around the cup like she was trying to pull heat out of it. For a minute, we just sat there in this awkward silence. two people whose lives had been set on fire by the same two hands. "I started suspecting about 4 months ago," she said finally. "I knew for sure 3 weeks back. Hotel receipts," he said, "were for counseling out of town. I called the front desks. No conference rooms, just a king bed." She gave this bitter half laugh. "But who's going to believe the pastor's wife, right? I'm emotional. I'm jealous. I'm attacking his ministry." I slid the manila folder out of my bag and set it between us. "You're not crazy," I said. "You're not alone either." She looked at it, then at me. Her voice was tired, but steady. "Then let's stop protecting their lies," she said. "Let's tell the truth." We opened that folder together like it was a crime scene file, because that's what it was. Screenshots of text threads, cropped photos of hotel rooms, call logs, timestamps, printouts of credit card charges, with dates that matched the marriage counseling trips he'd mentioned from the pulpit. I'd highlighted things in yellow the night before. Seeing it in daylight made it feel even uglier. For almost 2 hours, we didn't say much. Every now and then, Hannah would point at something. "He told me that weekend was a men's retreat," or "that was the night he said he was at an elders meeting." My humiliation and her heartbreak lined up cleanly on the page. Same days, same lies, same man. "At first," she admitted, "I thought I'd just quietly divorce him, take the kids, disappear, let the church figure it out later." She shook her head. "But if he can do this while preaching about faithfulness every Sunday, what's to stop him from doing it again somewhere else? With someone else?" I stared at my own handwriting in the margins. Public sin, public consequences. "Justice matters more than keeping this pretty," I said. "For your kids, for the people who trusted him, for every guy sitting in those pews thinking, 'That's the man I want to be.'" We both knew then it couldn't stay in a back room or a board meeting. It had to happen where the lies lived, in front of the same people he'd been fooling. She held out her hand, not for a shake, not for comfort, just as a quiet agreement. I took it. We weren't just hurt spouses anymore. We'd just become witnesses. Once we agreed this had to be public, the question became how. Hannah said, "If I get up there angry and screaming, they'll write me off as the crazy wife." She wasn't wrong. So we sat at my kitchen table with legal pads and pens, and she started drafting what she wanted to say. No fancy language, no cheap shots, just facts. "My name is Hannah Crane. Many of you know me as the pastor's wife." She wrote it out line by line, then read it aloud. Her voice shook the first time, less the second. By the fifth, it was steady, not cold, just clear. We worked the wording like a joint project, cut anything that sounded like gossip, kept anything that sounded like truth. She didn't say monster, she said my husband. She didn't say trash, she said affair. We swapped exposed for brought into the light, and we made sure one line stayed in. Public sin requires public accountability. My job was the visuals. I took the worst screenshots, cropped out anything too explicit, left enough context that nobody could say we were exaggerating. Text threads, hotel receipts, dates, names, ugly, but clean. We saved everything to a USB. She printed her final draft, folded the pages once, and slid them into her Bible. When she closed the cover, it felt like loading a shell into a chamber. Calling out a pastor is one thing. Doing it in his own sanctuary takes planning. Saturday afternoon, I drove over to the church under the excuse of helping with slides for Sunday. That wasn't unusual. I'd filled in for the media team before. Mike Ruiz, the guy who ran sound and projection, was already in the booth, headphones around his neck. "Hey man," I said, holding up the USB. "Hannah's got a special announcement she wants to do tomorrow. She asked me to help set up some visuals. Sensitive, but important." He didn't ask what it was. Pastor's wife. That title still carried weight. "Yeah, sure," he said. "Let's plug it in." We loaded the file, simple title, then a sequence of images. He clicked through them on the big back wall screen while I watched from the sanctuary. Names readable, dates clear, nothing obscene, no way to claim out of context. "Can we lock the source?" I asked. "Last thing we need is somebody bumping a button mid-service," he grinned. "Already done. Once I hit this, Nobody else touches anything. We tested it twice. Lights up, images advance, audio stays live. On my end, I had backups. The same folder in the cloud, hard copies of the screenshots and receipts in a manila envelope in my truck. If that USB somehow went missing, the truth wasn't going with it. Mike closed the program, pulled the drive out, and handed it back. "You're set," he said. Then he looked at me a half-second longer than usual, like he could sense something big was coming, and added, "We're good." Saturday night felt like standing on a train track, hearing the rumble, not seeing the lights yet. Becca was buzzing around the kitchen, talking about how excited she was for week 3 of the Faithful Marriage series. "Mitchell says this one's really going to land," she laughed, chopping vegetables. "He wants couples to renew their vows next week." The words made my skin crawl. I leaned against the counter, kept my face neutral. "I'm just tired," I said when she asked why I was so quiet. It was easier than saying, "I'm about to light a match to this whole show you're both putting on." The kitchen was washed in that soft yellow from the overhead light, the kind that usually made the house feel warm. That night, it just made everything look fake, like a stage set. Later, in our bedroom, she laid out a dress for the morning and went to shower. I opened my top drawer and took out the small USB drive. It didn't look like much, cheap plastic, little metal strip, but it held every reason my life would never be the same. I rolled it in my fingers and heard one sentence in my head. If not now, then never. When I finally put it in my pocket, set my wallet next to it on the nightstand, I knew I'd already crossed the line. There was no going back. Morning came too bright. Becca moved around the room humming to herself, holding up different dresses before settling on the blue one I'd always liked. "This one?" she asked, smiling, like we were still that couple picking outfits for date night. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The drive to Lakeside was quiet. Maple Ridge rolled past the windows. Same houses, same gas stations, same cracked sidewalks I'd driven by 1,000 times. Only difference was the pounding in my chest. My heart matched the rhythm of the wipers clearing a light mist off the windshield. Every so often she'd glance over. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just thinking about work." Truth was, I was praying under my breath. "God, give me a spine. Don't let me fold." As we pulled into the church lot, I saw it was already packed. Trucks, minivans, people in their Sunday best walking up the steps, shaking hands, laughing. My community. The same folks who'd told us, "You two are such a solid couple." I put the truck in park and sat there for a beat longer than normal. Slipped my hand into my jacket pocket, feeling for the shape I knew was there. Cold plastic, sharp edge, the USB. I closed my fingers around it, took one slow breath, and stepped out into the morning like a man walking toward his own explosion. We walked in like any other Sunday. Greeters at the door, same handshake, same, "Good to see you guys." We smiled back like we always did. Nobody had any idea there was a bomb sitting in my jacket pocket. Becca led the way down the right side aisle to our usual spot. 5th row, edge seats. Habit is a powerful thing. Even when your life is coming apart, your feet still know where to go. Up front, I saw Hannah in the 1st row with their kids. She didn't look back at us, but I could see the tightness in her shoulders, the way her hands rested on the kids' knees a little too carefully. She knew what was coming. I knew what was coming. Nobody else did. Mitchell stepped up to the pulpit, all easy confidence, Bible in hand, that same practiced smile. "Good morning, church family," he said, and the room answered like a well-trained choir. A chill ran straight down my back. Becca slipped her hand into mine and gave it a squeeze, the way wives do when they're proud of their husbands and their church and their life. I didn't squeeze back. The band played, voices rose, hands lifted. Worship washed over the room like it always did, but my eyes stayed open. I watched the clock on the back wall and listened as the music slowly faded, instruments dropping out one by one. Time for the sermon. He opened his Bible to Matthew like he'd done 1,000 times. "Today we're talking about building your marriage on the rock," Mitchell said. "Not on sand, not on feelings, on commitment, on faithfulness." Men around me leaned forward, wives tucked closer to their husbands. If you'd frozen the room right then, it would have looked like a picture in some Christian magazine. To everyone else, his words sounded wise. To me, they sounded like a knife slicing paper, clean, cruel, pretending not to cut. He talked about staying when it's hard, about guarding your heart from temptation, about how the enemy loves to destroy godly homes. He made eye contact with couples as he spoke, nodding like he understood their private battles. At one point he glanced in our direction, and I swear there was the faintest flicker in his eyes before he moved on. Becca let out a soft laugh at one of his little jokes about leaving the toilet seat up, squeezed my arm like we were in on something sweet together. I felt nothing but numb and rage layered on top of each other. In my head, one thought kept repeating, "You're hiding behind a Bible. You're using God like a prop while you burn everything down." Somewhere in the middle of that sermon, while he was telling husbands to love your wives like Christ loved the church, something inside me clicked into place. This ends today. Every sermon at Lakeside ended the same way. "Let's bow our heads and close our eyes," Mitchell said, voice warm and calm, like he hadn't just spent 40 minutes preaching about a kind of faithfulness he didn't believe in. Around me, 200 heads dipped, seats creaked, a few people whispered quiet prayers. From the outside, it looked peaceful, holy even. Inside my chest, it sounded like a war drum. I didn't bow my head. I stared straight ahead at the back of his Bible and then let my eyes slide down to the front row, to where Hannah was sitting with their kids. Her shoulders rose and fell once, like she was taking in one last breath of the old life. Then she stood up. Nobody saw her. Every eye was closed, every head bowed, just like he'd asked. She stepped into the aisle and walked toward the stairs at the side of the stage. Mitchell kept praying, asking God to protect our marriages, keep us pure, guard our hearts from temptation. He had no idea his own wife was moving toward him like a slow, steady verdict. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears it nearly drowned him out as she reached the pulpit. Then he said, "Amen," and opened his eyes. His prayer ended at the exact second our reckoning began. When his eyes opened and he saw her standing there, something flickered across his face. Surprise first, then confusion, and underneath that, the beginning of fear. The room was still in that quiet after "Amen," where people are deciding whether to look up or keep their heads bowed for a second longer. Hannah didn't touch him. She just said, clearly enough for the front rows to hear, "I need to make an announcement." Mitchell forced a smile, the same one he used when a kid yelled during a sermon. "Honey, this isn't really the time," he murmured into the mic. She didn't blink. "It's exactly the time." That's when the sound in the room shifted, chairs scraping, people lifting their heads, a low murmur starting to build. I slid out of our row without a word to Becca and started walking toward the media booth at the back. With every step, I could feel eyes turning, whispers starting. They didn't know what was wrong yet, but they knew something was. Up front, Hannah held out her hand. After a tiny hesitation, Mitchell passed her the microphone. Maybe he still thought he could control it. Maybe he thought she'd say something sweet about the sermon. She wrapped her fingers around that mic like it was the only thing holding her upright. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't the one in charge of the story. By the time I reached the media booth, every pair of eyes in that sanctuary was glued to the front. Hannah stood steady, mic in hand. Mitchell hovered half a step behind her, smile gone, jaw tight. Mike looked at me as I stepped in beside him, his eyebrows pulled together. "What's going on?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I just took the USB out of my pocket and held it out. "Run the file we tested," I said. "Announcement final." He glanced from the drive to my face, then back to the stage where the pastor's wife was about to say something that sounded a whole lot bigger than a bake sale reminder. But he trusted her, and he trusted me, so he plugged it in. On stage, Hannah's voice carried through the speakers. "Many of you know me as the pastor's wife," she began. "Today, I need you to know the truth about the man you've been following." Mike's cursor hovered over the file. I nodded once. He clicked. The house lights dimmed a little as the screens behind the pulpit lit up. Big white letters on a black background. Message thread, Mitchell Crane, Becca Hale. Then the first screenshot filled the screen. Blue and gray bubbles, names clear, words sharp enough to cut. "Can't wait to feel you again." Last night was holy. I swear God is in this. You could read it from the back row. There was no misunderstanding what it was. For half a second, the sanctuary was dead silent. Then the sound hit all at once, one loud gasp that rolled through the room, chairs scraping, someone whispering, "No, no, no," another voice saying, "Oh my God," like a prayer and a curse at the same time. I heard a woman start sobbing before the first screenshot had even faded. On stage, Mitchell lunged for the mic. "This is out of context," he snapped, reaching past Hannah. She turned her body, shielding the microphone with one hand and holding the pages of her statement with the other. "Let them see," she said, not into the mic this time, just to him. "They deserve to see." The next slide came up. Hotel receipts. Same chain, same town, his name, her name, dates and times that lined up with marriage retreats and pastor counseling trips. Another slide, more texts. "These sermons about faithfulness are killing me, but it's worth it for us." That word, us, hit me like a slap. Around the room, people stood up. Some shouted questions. Some just stood there shaking their heads, like if they moved too fast, the whole place would come down. I saw board members pushing their way down the aisles toward the front, faces pale and tight. Mitchell kept trying to talk over the noise, but the mic was no longer his shield. His private life was 10 feet tall on both sides of him, and there was nowhere left to hide. I don't know exactly when Becca realized what was on the screen. Maybe it was when she saw her name next to his at the top of the messages. Maybe it was that "us" line. All I know is, I felt her hand slip out of mine like someone had cut a cord. I looked over. Her face was gray, not just pale, like the blood had dropped straight out of her. Her eyes were locked on the screen, wide and glassy, tracking every word she'd typed, now blown up for the whole church to see. Her best friend from children's ministry, the one who always sat on the other side of her, actually shuffled a few inches away. Not dramatic, just enough that I noticed. The look on her face wasn't anger yet. It was raw disbelief and something close to disgust. "Nathan," Becca's voice cracked. "Nathan, I had nothing left to say. Up front, Mitchell was still trying to wrestle the narrative back, his words swallowed by the noise. Then Hannah raised her voice into the mic, clear and steady. "For the record, Nathan had no prior knowledge of this. He's as blindsided and betrayed as I am." 200 people turned, some of them looking right at me. I didn't speak. I didn't wave. I just turned, stepped out of the row, and walked up the aisle toward the exit. For once, I chose not to clean up anyone else's mess. The sound hit me first when I pushed the doors open. Cold air, and then the muffled roar of the sanctuary dropping down a few notches, like someone had shut a lid on a boiling pot. Outside, it was just another Ohio Sunday. Cars lined up in uneven rows, wind cutting across the lot hard enough to sting. I sucked in a lungful of it like a man who'd been underwater. A minute later, the doors opened again and Hannah came out with the kids. Madison looked furious and confused, jaw clenched, eyes shiny. The twins just looked lost, clinging to their mom's coat. Hannah's eyes were red but dry. She walked them a little ways past the entrance, away from the windows, then turned to face me. For a second, we just stood there, two people with nothing left to hide and no idea what comes next. "Thank you," she said quietly. Not dramatic, not emotional, just simple. "I couldn't have done that alone." "We helped each other," I answered. And it was the truth. Behind us, the church doors swung shut on their own. The noise from inside dropped to almost nothing, just a faint hum under the wind. I didn't look back. Whatever was happening in there belonged to them now. What came next, for me, for her, for our kids, for that whole town, would start out here, in the cold. I didn't go home. I drove past our street without slowing down, out toward the edge of town where the gas stations thin out and the billboards turn into fields. Pulled into a tired little motel I'd passed 100 times and never really seen. The woman at the front desk slid a key across without much eye contact. To her, I was just another guy who didn't want to go where he was supposed to sleep that night. As soon as I dropped my bag on the motel bed, my phone started ringing. Becca. Again, and again, and again. I watched her name flash on the screen, then fade, then pop back up. I let it go to voicemail. When the calls stopped, the texts started. "I'm so sorry. How could you do that to me? We could have talked. You humiliated me. We can fix this. Just come home, please. The tone swung from panicked to angry to guilt-tripping and back again. It was like watching someone spin a wheel and try every option but actual repentance. I turned the sound off, laid back on the hard mattress, and stared at the stained ceiling. Then I opened the voicemail tab, selected all of her messages, and hit delete. For the first time in a long time, I chose silence over being managed. By Monday morning, what happened at Lakeside wasn't just a church problem anymore. A buddy from work texted me a link before I even got out of bed at the motel. Local news site, front page. Pastor exposed for affair during Sunday service at Maple Ridge Church. They'd blurred the kids' faces in the photos. They hadn't blurred his. The article was short, but it didn't need to be long. Longtime pastor. Alleged affair with a congregant. Public confrontation by spouse. That was enough. In a town like ours, people could fill in the rest. My phone buzzed all day with messages from guys who'd sat next to me in men's group, who'd heard me brag about my solid marriage. You okay, man? Just saw the news. I don't even know what to say. Whatever you need, brother. Seriously. I didn't have a speech in me. I answered most of them the same way, just breathing. It was the best I could do. Put one lungful of air in, let it out, repeat. That afternoon, an email blast went out from the church board. I must have read the subject line 10 times. Official statement. Pastor Mitchell Crane resigns, effective immediately. Just like that, the man I used to trust with my soul was no longer pastor anything. He was just another guy who blew up his life. There's this moment a lot of us hope we'll never face, sitting across from a lawyer, talking about how to unwind a life you swore you'd never walk away from. Ohio still lets fault play a part in divorce. Adultery isn't just morally bad there, it actually matters on paper. When I laid everything out in that conference room, the church, the affair, the screenshots the whole town had basically seen, the attorney just nodded slowly. You've got solid grounds, he said. You're not walking in here with rumors, you're walking in here with evidence. We went through assets, the house, retirement, all the unromantic pieces that make up a marriage on the practical side. He explained what I could fight for, what would likely hold up, what a judge would see before I ever opened my mouth. It should have felt cold. Instead, it felt clean. For years, I thought being a good man meant absorbing damage and keeping the peace at all costs. Sitting in that chair, I realized sometimes being a good man means drawing a hard line and staying on the side of truth, no matter how much it hurts. When he slid the stack of papers across the desk and handed me a pen, my hand didn't shake. Truth over comfort. I put the pen down on my own name and signed. Becca did what a lot of people do when the reality hits. She came out swinging. Through her attorney, she pushed for half of everything. The house, the savings, retirement, even some of my future earnings. The argument was predictable. Long marriage, shared life, emotional abuse from the public exposure. They tried to make the scandal my fault, as if I'd invented the affair by dragging it into the light. My lawyer stayed calm and slid the same packet across the table we'd prepared for the church board. Timestamps, messages, hotel records, public sin, public documentation. There wasn't much left to argue about. In a no-fault state, maybe, my attorney told me later. But here with this, she's not in a strong position. Eventually, her side changed tone. The demands softened. Reality set in. We landed on a settlement. She kept her car, her personal things, a modest 3-month cushion to get on her feet somewhere else. I kept the house, the bulk of our savings, and most importantly, the right to close this chapter without her dragging it out for sport. The day the judge signed off, I sat there in that stiff chair and listened to the formal language. Dissolved, decree, partition of assets. No fireworks, no dramatic speeches, just a stamp, a signature, and the sound of something heavy finally being set down. When we walked out of that building in opposite directions, I felt my shoulders drop an inch. For the first time since this whole thing started, I exhaled all the way to the bottom. If my life got shattered, theirs got ground into smaller pieces. Hannah filed for divorce a few weeks after I did. For her, it wasn't just about a broken marriage. It was about 3 kids who'd just watched their father fall off a pedestal in front of the entire town. Mitchell didn't stick around long. Word was he took some kind of regional sales job 2 states over. No more sermons, No more stage, just a company car and a laptop. His social media disappeared overnight. Like if he scrubbed his profiles clean, the past might follow. Hannah stayed in Maple Ridge. Somebody had to keep the kids' world from spinning off completely. She got them into counseling, one by one. I'd see them sometimes in town, the boys a little quieter than before, Madison walking with that teenage mix of anger and protectiveness you don't learn in a textbook. Hannah always had one hand on a shoulder, an anchor in human form. Every now and then I'd send a short text. Thinking of you guys today. Praying for the kids' session. Nothing heavy, just present. One evening after a particularly rough court date, she replied, "We're not okay yet, but we will be. We'll be okay." For the first time, I believed that could be true for both of our families. Church was never the same after that. Maybe it shouldn't have been. In the months that followed, about half the congregation drifted off. Some left angry, some embarrassed, some just tired of the drama. New faces stopped coming. The parking lot on Sundays went from packed to reasonable. The ones who stayed weren't there for the show anymore. No one cared about slick series titles or clever stage props. We sang simpler songs. The prayers got more honest. God, we're hurt. Help us figure out what to do with that. Not a lot of churchy polish on it. A lot of people needed counseling. Marriages shaken just from watching what happened to ours. Folks questioning their faith, their judgment, their ability to trust anyone in authority again. The church brought in outside therapists. For once, they didn't try to handle everything in-house. I started showing up to a small men's group not as the guy with the answers, just as another man trying to stay upright. We sat in folding chairs in a side room and told the truth more than we quoted verses. Less advice, more listening. Less, bro, just pray about it. More, yeah, that hurts like hell. One night, I looked around that circle of tired, flawed, stubborn men and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't the old, shiny church pride. It was quieter than that. It was the simple realization, there's still a home here, if we build it on something real this time. About 6 months after everything blew up, Lakeside brought in an interim pastor. Her name was Helen Ward, mid-50s, gray streaks in her hair, no attempt to hide the years on her face. She walked up to the pulpit without the swagger I was used to. No hype, no who's excited to be in the house of the Lord, just a woman with a Bible and a stack of notes that didn't look rehearsed to death. Her first sermon wasn't about vision or growth or moving forward. It was called Character Over Titles. She said, "A title can be handed to you. Character is proven over time. Don't confuse the two again." No names, no gossip, but everyone knew what she was talking about. For the first time, someone on that stage wasn't trying to protect the brand. She was trying to tell the truth. She didn't shout. She didn't beg for amens. She just laid it out. Trust has to be earned. Leaders are not above accountability, and God isn't fragile. He doesn't fall apart when we admit what's broken. I sat there in the 5th row, same seat, different man, and felt something I hadn't felt inside a church in a long time. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched. I just sat still and took one long, full breath. Healing didn't come in some big breakthrough moment. It came in small, boring things I never thought I'd have to relearn at my age. At night, when the house was too quiet and my mind started replaying hotel wallpapers and text threads, I'd sit on the edge of the bed and force myself to breathe slow. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. It felt stupid at first, like something a therapist would say on a daytime talk show, but it kept me from spiraling. I started running again. Nothing heroic, just loops around the lake on the edge of town. First mile felt like punishment. Second mile felt like my body was finally catching up to what my heart had been through. Each step was a little bit of anger burning off instead of eating me alive. One Saturday, my buddy Joel, the trucker who's seen half the country and most of its truck stops, met me at a diner. We drank bad black coffee, and he listened more than he talked. When I told him I felt like I was rebuilding from rubble, he shrugged and said, "1 mile at a time, brother." I stared at my cup and nodded. Yeah, one truth at a time, too. For some reason, that line hit us both, and I laughed. Really laughed. Not the tight, automatic chuckle I'd been using for months. It was the first time since everything went down that the sound coming out of my own mouth didn't feel fake. Growing up, nobody said it out loud, but the message was pretty clear. Being a man meant you shut up and took it. You worked, you provided, you didn't complain. If something hurt, you buried it under another 12-hour day and called it being strong. You didn't talk about betrayal, and you sure didn't admit you'd been blindsided by your own wife and your own pastor. For a while, I carried this shame that wasn't even mine. I felt stupid, weak, like I should have seen it sooner, stopped it somehow, guarded my house better. Then one night it finally clicked. I didn't break the vows. I didn't sneak into hotel rooms and hide behind Bible verses. The shame isn't on the one who got lied to. The shame belongs to the liars. Being a man isn't about how much you can silently absorb. It's about what you do when the truth shows up and demands something from you. Do you look away, protect your image, keep things neat? Or do you stand in it, tell the truth, and let the chips fall where they fall? I lost a marriage. I lost a pastor. I lost the version of myself who thought those things could never crack. But here's what I've come to believe, and I'm not saying it lightly. This didn't break me. It rebuilt me. When the papers were signed and the dust settled, it was just me and the house. You don't realize how much of your life lives in objects until you start picking them up one by one. Her mug on the second hook, the blanket she liked on movie nights, photos from trips that now felt like someone else's memories. I didn't torch the place. I didn't throw everything out in a fit of rage. I went room by room, kept what still felt honest, boxed what didn't. Wedding pictures came off the wall. A few went into a storage bin for legal reasons, the rest into a trash bag. I swapped the comforter, repainted the bedroom, moved the bed. Petty? Maybe. But I needed to stop sleeping in a museum of a life that wasn't real anymore. In the living room, I left the old coffee table but cleared the stacks of marriage devotionals Mitchell had recommended. Replaced them with a couple of books that didn't pretend to have all the answers. Every so often I'd step outside, call or text Hannah just to check in. She told me she'd started writing about spiritual abuse and recovery online. People keep finding it, she said. Turns out it's not just us. That made me weirdly proud, like at least our wreckage was lighting up some warning signs for other people. One evening I sealed the last box of things to donate, taped it shut, and set it by the door. The house was quieter, barer, but somehow it finally felt honest. For the first time, it looked like a place a new life could actually fit into. If you've made it this far with me, hear this part clearly. Private betrayal, when it's carried out in public, needs public truth. You're not weak because somebody lied to you. You're not stupid because you trusted. Trust is not the sin. Lying is. We live in a world that tells men to shut up, suck it up, and pretend they're fine while their lives are on fire. I'm telling you the opposite. You are not less of a man for being cheated on. You become more of a man by what you do with the truth. Don't let them spin the story and make you the problem. Keep your receipts. Keep your spine. Call things what they are. Then start rebuilding the only way that actually works. Breathe. Show up to work. Tell the truth. Choose real people over shiny images. Let go of what was fake, even if it looked good from the outside. And if you know another man walking around with that same hollow look I used to have, pass this story to him. Let him know he's not crazy, and he's not alone. My name is Nathan Colefield. My wife slept with our pastor. I let his wife give the Sunday announcement. And when it came down to it, I chose truth over comfort.